All right, everybody, episode 18. Nate here with Startup Nation. San Marcos Mayor Rebecca Jones. She's a badass. We just learned that. So, but we're going to talk about something that's actually quite interesting here, specifically about something I really never thought of until her and I had coffee a couple weeks ago. And it was about how the housing market actually can affect small business relative to employment, retention of employees, which, as everybody knows, the famous old saying, retention of employees, every single time you lose an employee, it's like a tenfold cost to then replace that person based on the position and role and all that. So I think this will be quite of an interesting episode here, because it's something a lot of people don't put a lot of thought into, but it's something you should at least be conscious of and just address it relative to where your business operates out of. I'm going to turn it over to Rebecca. She's going to give us her input on the housing market, and then we'll have a little bit of a back and forth regarding how that might affect small business.
Yeah, thanks. So if you think about businesses, you're opening up a new business, what do you need? You need employees. Yeah. So if you are, if you're opening a business that needs employees and you're not automated, then you need to think about people. And would you go out and put your business in the middle of nowhere where there are no houses available and no people? Mm-hmm. Obviously not. You want to move to a city where there's housing. And so unfortunately in San Diego County and a lot of places throughout the state of California, we have a housing shortage. Mm-hmm. And then we have an issue because everything's so expensive. And so one of the things in San Marcos is we have about 77% of our folks that live in the city have to go drive elsewhere to work.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we were just talking about that with George, the videographer, just behind the scenes here. He drives from Temecula all the way down every day, right?
And that's pretty common. If you think about your employees that are working for our city specifically, our firemen, our sheriff deputies, and then our teachers, mm-hmm. Which we have CSU, San Marcos, and then Palomar College. If you think about all of those folks, a lot of them, if they haven't owned their homes for more than 10 years, they are literally driving from Temecula, Murrieta area because of the affordability. And so unfortunately, as things get more expensive, the more difficult it is to have people live close to their home. And then what does that do? That degrades your quality of life.
I think it definitely can affect, Green Guard is a lot of people know that watch this podcast, it's a blue collar industry. We clean kitchen exhaust systems for a living. So naturally the type of employee we hire are people that are blue collar and that work their butts off. But it's going to be a lower level paying job. And so with that being said, that makes the commute even more of a difficulty for us, right? Because it's one thing where if somebody's making six figures, the commute, yes, they'll deal with it. It's still not ideal, great, but there's only so many of those jobs out there. So right. Anybody that has lowered middle paying jobs and then having to commute 45 minutes a day, the gas costs and a lot of these other things that maybe business owners don't consider can actually add up to be quite a hindrance relative to retention of employees.
Right.
Yeah.
So as a city council member and now mayor, one of the things that we struggle with is really figuring out where to provide those opportunities and trying to create housing that is affordable for folks. And so in 2012, the state eliminated affordable housing funds, which was a problem. So there were these large agencies throughout the state that were able to create more of a revenue generation from property tax. And it was called tax increment, but I won't get into all that because it's extremely complicated. However, then the state said, oh, well, there's going to be a boon for us if we go ahead and we eliminate these agencies, which honestly never happened. But what it did eliminate was a revenue source for us to build affordable housing. So you have some affordable housing, you have mobile homes, a few condominiums, and then it really jumps up to the $700,000 and $800,000 price range. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, up to 700,000. There's no housing in that range, and so you've got folks that are small families that are having to move further away. You generally have both parents that are working to even purchase a home up in Temecula or Marietta. You've got kids that are that don't have their parents at home very much, and so they're spending a lot of time away from one another, and really it degrades your quality of life. So for us in the city of San Marcos in January of last year, we approved a housing development in that upper $300,000 range, and it went to referendum because no one wants housing built because they already have their house.
Sure.
And shoot, if you're not working really hard to get that in between housing, you're missing out on keeping your residents or your people that work in San Marcos. But also, our kids are coming home from college. Where do they go? Well, my kids, not yours. But you have kids coming home from college. Where are they going to live? They don't have these opportunities, so you're moving further away from your parents as well. And that's a problem. So
yeah, I think to take it a little bit further too, from a banking standpoint, it's not nearly as easy to qualify for homes as it used to be, right? And so you can't just go and buy a $700,000 house if you're not making enough money like you used to be able to. So for all those people that make a reasonable living, $30 to $40, $50, $60, $70,000 a year, probably can't afford those $700,000 homes, but there's nothing else they can afford other than maybe a $300,000 condo. And so that's where I think that the issue resides too, is that because that middle ground was missing, that's where they're almost just, there's really no other option but to go further north. Right?
Well, guess what else it creates? It creates an issue with rentals as well. So the tighter market, there are less homes that are available for folks that are in that price range. And so then the rentals are very expensive. So Block C, you know where that's at, right? Block C, 700 square feet.
No, we talked about
not very big.
Next to the coffee shop.
Yeah, right? Next to the coffee shop, Block C. It's $2,400 a month, and if you want a 6-month lease, it's an extra $500. That's $2,900 a month.
For 700 square foot space.
For 700 square feet. Yep, it is. And so if you look at just the affordability and what not approving the housing is creating, it's creating a difficulty for businesses, because when you have large businesses that want to come into a community, they need places for their folks to live so that they can be close to home. They don't have to spend a tremendous amount of their time and effort. I would argue that if you're not living close to home, you're less likely to stay at work another 10, 15 minutes. If you're in the middle of trying to meet a deadline, you're going to want to leave because you've got an hour and a half commute. And it also creates a lot of traffic on our roads. And then, who wants to sit in traffic? I sure don't. So, it really has a lot of unintended consequences if you're not really thinking about how housing fits with businesses.
Like I say, a lot of those non-quantifiable aspects, you bring up a very good point with that. We even experience here with Green Guard, because I think people are going to take those jobs if they have to because they need them. But the reality is that due to the drive times and the commutes and the costs associated with the maintenance on their vehicles and all that, eventually they're going to say if they find something else. I would guess to argue that if you did a study that the retention went down due to these types of facts too, right? Because a lot of our employees here, even at Green Guard, they're commuting from like East County areas, in areas like that, because they can't afford to necessarily live in the North County area. And because of that, though, they're having to commute 30, 40. We're lucky because it's all at night, so it tends to be a lot more effective, but we're the exception to the rule. And so with that being said, I know people, or the business owners even on the 78 corridor, that say they're just like, I had somebody the other day, specifically a business owner that was a restaurant owner, say if they apply and they have a pulse, we will hire them, which is like pain in my ears to hear that, right? Because we just got done talking about the fact that culture is everything in restaurants, right, specifically. And to build a culture, you got to hire the right person. But if they're literally saying, I can't even get an applicant in the door to even hire them, so they'll just take anybody, is not what you want to hear. And you have to know that the housing situation and the current situation we're in, that has played a big role in that. So,
well, it does, and it affects, like you said, it affects the quality of service that you're providing, and the retention is true, because most people stay at a job and usually a long time if they're happy, right? But if you're driving every day for such a long amount of time, it grates on you. Yeah. You can do it for a while, and maybe you can do it for a good amount of time. But unfortunately, it really does change your perspective of what's important to you, and then your quality of life. You keep thinking about, wow, I'm spending 3 hours a day. If you're spending an hour and a half in the morning and then the evening, that's 3 hours of your life that you're never getting back. And so I would argue that people are moving on more because of that reason.
Yeah, I know. We have a lot of friends that have moved to different states, even like Texas, and all those have become a lot more promising. But I got a good friend, give you a call, Joe, since you always gave me crap on these podcasts. I've known him since third grade, but he literally commutes from Temecula area down to Claremont, PB area every single day. He's been doing it for like 5-6 years now. He's a police officer, so it's a little bit different because of his type of role he has. But the reality is he has some kids, and so it takes him an hour minimum, an hour and 20 minutes. He has a get out of jail free card when it comes to speeding, I'm sure. And he's going to give me shit for saying that, but it's probably true. But the reality is that if him and I at one point added this up. We were at Bellows the other night and we were talking about it, and I was saying 2 hours a day at 4 days a week, and then multiplying that times 10 years. I mean, you're talking about a substantial amount of time that, one, you're not getting paid for, and two, is taken away from family time or a lot of these other factors that definitely play a role in your overall satisfaction of probably your life if you want to get really deep into it, but also your business and just your satisfaction with family time and all that. So it's
well, and I don't know if you know this, but San Diego PD is down by a significant amount
I'm
of.
very familiar with that.
Yeah, and so then you also have the extra layer of, specifically in San Diego, the police department. They have a hard time attracting the officers, and I would argue that a lot of that has to do with quality of life because of the expense of housing. And
the pay
you know,
too, right? They're having some issues
well,
with that too, right?
exactly. But if you and the pay goes back to, can you afford the housing that's around?
Right.
So
Yep.
I mean, it's all definitely connected. And I mean, everyone wants to buy a home.
Yeah.
They do. That's part of the American dream is owning a home, having a good quality of life. If you're spending a lot of your time on the road, it just isn't happening. And so if you look at the things that affect the success of businesses, you're right, a lot of businesses are leaving. And I would argue that part of it's a regulation, but it also is the housing too. And so really bringing in the big good high paying jobs, the big businesses, the high paying jobs, it's more difficult to do that when the housing is so expensive. And we have Hunter Industries in San Marcos. They've been there a long time. I think since maybe 1981. They talk about it to us. I mean, these large employers do discuss with us that we have a difficult time with specifically how expensive housing is.
Hiring and all that stuff.
And so as legislators, that's a challenge for us. And like I had mentioned before, there's housing mandates. The state requires us to build a certain amount of housing, but they keep regulating us and adding to the expensive housing. And so, it's a push-pull, and then you've got your folks that, say, well, I have to live far away because that's where I can afford to buy a house. But then they're also clogging the roads, and there isn't any extra housing money for that too. So, our road money, and so you've got this whole circle that just keeps coming around and around, spinning out of control. And I don't honestly know where it's going to end up happening. But we want the businesses to be successful, but they do. They really have a difficult time attracting folks when it's just so expensive to live here.
I mean, I was born in San Diego and then raised in San Marcos since 1988. So I remember San Marcos back then. It was like, 1 or 2 lanes all the way to the beach, right? And so it was, Cal State San Marcos. Atlantic Dairy was the thing back then, right? And the reason I bring that up is because the evolution of housing prices has been, quite interesting in San Marcos specifically. But at one point, but that's also affected the traffic. And I hear that even from like some of my day staff now, where they even leave and can get to work early because they don't want to deal with the traffic. But like the 78, we had a meeting the other day in Vista, and he was coming up the 5, the 78, and it took him from I want to say the 805 area all the way to Vista. It took him an hour and a half to get there. Right, which would have taken 25 minutes normally if it wasn't, right? And then we know that a lot of that has to do with these circumstances, and it's kind of scary and it's a reality, and so people literally avoid having to do that, which isn't necessarily what we're looking for. We want something where it's a best fit, where people aren't going to say, well, if I get this job and I have to leave at 5 every day, do I just stay at work, or do I not take the job? And then obviously at that point, that's where it becomes a problem. So.
Well, and another thing too is being that we're more urban, I'm sorry, downtown's more urban, we're more suburban. Yep. Transit doesn't actually work moving people around either. And so traffic, housing.
Lack
I
of
mean,
transit,
there are so many things to look at when you look at opening a business and the success of it. And you've got a lot of things that are stacked against you in the state of California. However, the ones that really prepare well, really pay attention to their location, I would say that they can really
absolutely.
be wildly successful.
I think that's important, and then understanding the level and the amount of employees you're going to hire, the type of employee you're going to hire, and if it fits well within like the cost of living associated with the area you're trying to grow in. I know for us, being located here in the San Marcos Escondido area, we definitely have a hard time hiring people, but luckily, because of the type of employees that we hire, it's a little bit not quite as difficult. We just have to be very, very clear on the expectations of the drive time associated with when they have to be here. And then what I've noticed with a lot of my business friends in this area is that they really focus on the culture of the business, right? They try to retain employees. And again, this is kind of like a byproduct, and maybe I'm reaching here a little bit, but our consultant probably feels this way as well, is that then companies are actually spending more money to build culture and build things to actually sustain the retention of employees due to the fact that there's a lot of outside factors they can't control, right? And a lot of them is commute. I remember my father, he until he recently retired, was driving from San Marcos. Mind you, he bought his house in '88, so that's the exception, right? Yep. But he worked in La Jolla, but there's no chance he was going to be able to afford La Jolla, so he literally commuted and did that for 15 plus years, right? But it's the same type of, conceptually the same idea we're talking about, and so those were one of those things where he might have been an exception to the rule, but a lot of people can't sustain that, and that's when they end up having a lot of variability in their careers. And again, if you really want to talk big picture, I wonder if it makes people actually not propel their careers forward as much because of a lot of limitations associated with that. So.
I would say it definitely does.
Yeah.
And there are all these outside factors, and housing, traffic, commutes, and also just really like I mentioned before, when you have someone that knows that they're going to have an hour and a half commute, they're not going to put in that extra 15 minutes just, voluntarily, because it's too difficult. And so I would agree that you probably have people not reaching their highest potential for that reason. Yeah,
people are just like, they want to help the business, they really enjoy the business, but unfortunately that doesn't necessarily trump family time and traffic and all that, right? Because it's not realistic. So it's definitely something that business owners should definitely look at, consider. Not necessarily make the entire decision associated with their business on it, but it's definitely something that they got to consider relative to a longer term growth strategy. Obviously, for brand new businesses that have 0 to 5 employees, probably not something that's going to be a drastic, fundamental issue for them. But like for example, Green Guard 4 years ago wasn't probably an issue. Now we're at 60 plus employees. We're not Hunter, but we're also not tiny. Now it's something we definitely have to consider, right? And we're looking at that same thing actually applies for our Los Angeles location. We have a location in Downey. And one, outside the fact that we just feel like the type of people is a little bit more difficult to hire there, but the philosophy with that too is just the fact that right in that area where the 605, 405, 5, all that meet, ideally it's good relative to getting to places pretty quickly, but it's nearly impossible from a traffic standpoint. I mean, somebody can go from Anaheim to there in the middle of the day and it could take an hour.
It's gridlock.
It's just ridiculous, right? Yeah. And so we got to find something that's going to be a little more streamlined, like say a Costa Mesa or even though 5 is bad, it's not nearly as bad because that big stretch on the 5, really, there's nothing there, right? And so that would be a lot more effective than somewhere where it's just right in the middle of 5 different freeways. And we never thought of that when we did it. And so now we're considering those things. And obviously, as you brought it up, it even makes us think more about the areas we're going to put our relocate if we do.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think about North County that is probably benefit is that you're closer to Riverside, and so you have those
centralized for sure. Yeah,
definitely. And I think too, having a couple of different ways in and out, so you've got the 5, the 78, and the 15. I think that's helpful too. I mean, if you go out in East County, the 52 and the 8, they are pure gridlock. So, and I'm definitely we have gridlock too. However, they just don't even.
Our cameraman behind the scenes here, Jared's almost crying right now because I think he deals with it quite often. So.
Oh yeah, the 52 is terrible.
Oh yeah, and so it's just something to consider. Yeah, I think North County is huge within that. That's why we did that. A lot of our business is actually downtown, but because of the fact that we can reach all those and we can easily reach our LA location from that, and we can reach going Inland Empire or Los Angeles. It's pretty important to consider those locations as well.
Absolutely.
Cool. Episode 18, I just want to recap. We talked a little bit about how the housing market and then all the relationship with the housing market and traffic and retention of employees all applies into one type of viewpoint that you definitely need to consider when you want to open a business or move your business. Rebecca Jones here, Mayor San Marcos, definitely gave some insight that I think a lot of people might not consider, but definitely should. And so please like, subscribe, share, any of that regarding this podcast. I greatly appreciate it. I want to thank you for coming out today. I know with your busy schedule, it means a lot.
Thank you.
And episode 18, Startup Nation. Good looking out. Have a good day.